Hey guys, Squeeve the Lazy Geek here, and today we're going to take some flat frames. We all love taking flat frames. For those not used to that, flat frames are basically a type of image that you take with your telescope or your camera lens, your setup basically, that will characterize all of the issues that you have in your optics. And using software like PixInsight or the free Deep Sky Stacker or Cyril, that kind of software, you can actually automatically remove those optical defects from the images that you took of galaxies, nebula, etc. It's an absolutely critical part of astrophotography, and if you're not taking flat frames for your images now, you should be. There are other calibration frames like dark frames or bias frames, but by far, in my opinion, flat frames are the most important of the bunch. If there's one thing you should spend time on, is doing flat frames. To take flat frames, you take your telescope, camera lens, or whatever your optical setup is, and with your camera attached to it, you make sure that the setup while taking pictures of the stars and the setup while taking flat frames is exactly the same. You cannot have moved the camera, changed the filter, or anything like that. Everything needs to be in the same orientation. One very common method for flat frames is to use the white t-shirt method. The white t-shirt method is the reason why every decent astrophotographer carries with them at all times in their pocket a white t-shirt and an elastic band, just like I have here. And yes, I absolutely carry this with me at all times. It is critical. You take your white t-shirt, preferably clean, so not the white t-shirt that you used when you went into the gears of your telescope and re-greased them, then wiped your hands on your t-shirt for whatever reason. You dirty astrophotographer. And up, we just apply it to the telescope like that. We use the elastic band to make sure there are no creases at the front. That is, it is as soft as silk. And then you move that to, you point that to a light source that's preferably fairly flat. It can be the dawn sky. It can be like a tablet with just a white page on it, and you press it there. Typically you really want to keep the brightness down though. Or for me, my favorite method has been with the white t-shirt to use a room in my house that does not have direct sunlight exposure, but there is ambient sunlight. Even better if it's just cloudy outside. And then I just point this at one of the white walls, because the white wall is like evenly illuminated. It's a perfect flat frame. And even then I can remove the t-shirt. You also need to know that your flat frames should be around 1, 2, 3 seconds long. You don't want to get them too short, especially if you're using like an electroluminescent panel or a tablet, because those can have like a refresh rate kind of on the monitor, and you need to average that out across a certain period of time. There are some cameras that also don't like exposures less than 1 second. There's all sorts of reasons for that. I typically err on the side of caution, and I'm at around 1.5 to 3 seconds. If you find, but the thing is, with that exposure time, you want to make sure that the peak of your histogram is roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the histogram width. If it goes beyond that, you're overexposing your flat frames. If it's below that, you're underexposing your flat frames. Still, you don't need to overthink it, but it does mean that if you're like 75% of the histogram, it means you're overexposing, and you need to maybe fold your t-shirt in 4 and then like have a thicker, basically barrier between your light source and the telescope. Or you want to decrease the luminosity on your tablet. This kind of stuff. You need to play around with things. Because I don't like to play around with things like that, I've switched a couple of years ago, a year ago, I don't remember when, to a different method, which is using a dedicated flat field generator. Those things are excellent, even if they're overpriced. This one has a button for me to adjust the luminosity. Some even allow you to change the luminosity of this flat panel via USB. So it can be controlled from Nina, for instance, which is like the luxury, the ultra luxury. And to actually use that, what I'll do is I'll simply get to Nina and tell Nina to point this telescope right to the zenith, and then I'll just plug that on. Let's do that. So here I am in Nina. I'm going to remove this, sorry. So here I am in Nina. First, I'm going to go into my mount control center. Basically, I'm just going to unpark it so I know it can slew. I'm going to stop the tracking as well because I don't need it to track. I'm not taking any images of stars. I told you to stop tracking. Why are you tracking? Bad boy. Then, once we are stopped tracking, I'm just going to make sure that I have connected to the telescope in Nina. I'm going to go into the flat wizards and I'm just going to click the slew to zenith. And it will slew to zenith because it's an obedient boy, typically. Okay, now that we are at zenith, I'm just going to apply the flat field generator. Boop, on the telescope. And I'm also going to tell the telescope to stop tracking again because it really wants to track after it's slewed. Okay, so we have the panel on the telescope. One of the things to know as well is that in theory, your flat frames don't need to be at the same temperature, gain, offset, or all of those parameters as your light frames, because you can use dark flats to calibrate your flat frames. And as long as the dark flats are the same gain, offset, etc. as the flat frames themselves, even if it's different from the light frames, in theory, it should be okay. That being said, I've never put this theory in practice. Just to be safe, I've always used basically the same gain, offset, etc. as my light frames and camera temperature as my light frames. That way, we're safe. It doesn't hurt to be safe. Now, the next step, I know I want my exposures to be around 2 seconds. So what I'll do is I'll first go into the imaging tab for a bit, and then I'll take an exposure of 2 seconds, like you see here, and I'm going to look at the histogram. And I can see, yeah, the histogram is roughly 1/3, a bit less than 1/3. So I'm just going to increase the brightness of my flat panel. You do that with your tablet or your electroluminescent panel, or you'd be like changing your t-shirt or whatever, the number of layers on your side, or if you're using a flat panel, you can do the same. And I can take another picture, and this looks a bit better with between 1/3 and 1/2. And why am I getting so many spikes? It's simply because I have 3 colors because of my Bayer array on the sensor, and there's a narrowband filter in between that's multi-band. It's a bit of a mess. So we take the average of everything, but anyway, the flat wizard will take care of all of that. So let's go back to the flat wizard. We slewed to zenith, and I'm going to say that I want to take 25 flats, and I'm going to also take dark flats or flat darks, whichever term you like. Some people call them tomato frames. But here we are, and I have a single filter. I don't have a filter wheel, so I'm just going to set single mode rather than multi-mode. Single mode, the filter will be the current one. The minimum exposure, I actually want it to be 1 second. I don't want less than 1 second, so I'm actually going to manually set 1 here. The max exposure, let's say I'm going to put 5 seconds. I already know from my test that 2 seconds should be more or less good. The step size, I'm going to let it at 0.5 seconds. And yeah, I like to put, like, let's say 40% as my histogram mean target. So again, I said between 1/3 and 1/2. 40% is like smack dab in the middle. That's kind of superstition on my side. I don't care, it works for me. Why change things when they work? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So here we are, and I'm just going to turn off the lights and click that play button. Yeah, I've turned off the light. Let's click the play button. And what it's doing right now is it is changing the exposure time until it finds an exposure time that will basically match the histogram target that you have. And it's already done so, apparently. So it's already taking the exposures, and the exposures are, yeah, a bit more than 1 second. I'm not sure exactly. 1.89 seconds. 1.89 seconds. I said that I want exposures between 1.5 and 3 seconds. Sounds good to me. And once Nina is done with the flat frames proper, we get the next screen, which tells me to cover my scope now, because we're going to take the dark flats, aka the flat darks, aka the tomato frames, or tomato frames, depending on where you're from. Let's close the telescope. I'm going to hide the flat panel so I don't have any light leaks into my equipment while I'm taking those flat darks. We're going to say OK, and now it's just taking the flat darks. and I'll be able to put those flat darks into Deep Sky Stacker, into PixInsight. They will be applied to my flats. I'll end up with calibrated flats, which will be applied to my my dark calibrated light frames. Ooh, this is so complicated. And once that's done, all of those dust motes and like weird optical defects of my setup will be automatically fixed, which is really amazing when you think about it. I absolutely love flat frames. And we're done. There's nothing more to do. I'm using this flat panel now as a beautiful YouTuber tool. I feel so pretty when I do that. And that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover in this video. This is something that I've done in previous videos in the past, but it's always good as a reminder on how to take flat frames to you know, look back at things. And to be honest, I've been recently taking pictures of of IC 1813, I believe, or no, 1318, sorry, next to Seder. So I'll be using those flat frames on that. We're not getting good weather these days, but yeah, I just need to be patient. And with that, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you found it interesting. And if you like this kind of video, this kind of tip and tricks, you're new to astrophotography, or you want to know more about the hobby, always feel free to go down below and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Like the video, leave a comment, etc. I love you guys. And most importantly, never forget whenever you can to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.